All right, welcome everybody. It is me, Legit Vocals, back here again doing another Union Arena video. This time I am going to be accompanied by Team Macaroni and Lullaby Anto, my fellow Union Arena content creators, and my teammates that I playtest these decks with and get advice from when it comes to certain things because I don't play all decks myself. I let them play some, and we each have our own unique play styles. And we wanted to give you our insights on how we think One Punch Man has affected our meta. So today we're going to go set by set, and we'll give our feedback on each deck and where we think it lies. I will talk about the decks I think I have more opinions on, and when it comes to certain decks that I know T-Mac or Anto have more experience or opinions on, I will let them address it there. So first, if we go to Bleach, we're going to start with purple. We have our typical Renji Rush. I still think this is a top 5 deck in our meta. It is like the standard for what an aggro deck needs to be. Multiple 4Ks, easy removal within the 5 costs. Ichigo, the Renji, having the pay 1 AP double damage to pressure your opponent to either give you a body or to take 2 life, speeding up your own clock. Not really much of an introduction. If you've been playing Union Arena, you really know this deck. The other purple deck would be Ichigo or Byakuya, or any kind of deck that you have purple cards in, but you're not focused on like just kind of rushing with 4Ks. I think this deck needs a little more support when we get to set 2, when we get the squad 0 stuff. Or if you are playing like a Byakuya build, I think that's more of a pilot dependent type deck. If you know your matchups, you know when you can go for it and when you can pressure your opponent. Nothing really crazy there. We have Yellow Asnod Rush or Stern Raider Rush. I honestly put this in, go play another game or a pet deck if it's kind of your thing. I think until we get these zombie Stern Raiders, this deck really doesn't have footing. If you want to play a rush deck, we have multiple other options that we'll get to that kind of fill that space and do the same thing this is doing. Then we have our first rogue deck, which is going to be Yawatch. I think the D rating is really going to help with some of our one punch decks here today. I know T Mac has been trying to see if he can make this deck work again. T Mac, do you have any thoughts on this deck?
I think the deck does well into certain matchups, specifically like Sisters, where you are able to pop the Hellish Blizzard. But otherwise from that, like it has some really bad matchups, and sometimes you just don't get there with the Yawatch line, or like if you able to go into the Jugram, sometimes you can't even get that to stick. So I think it's still in Rogue. I think it can sneak some matches, but I don't think it's going to be meta changing for this format until we get that set two stuff.
And then, arguably, your biggest pet deck and a deck I think is probably well suited here and is a great pilot dependent deck is your boy Toshiro. Why don't you give me your feedback on where you think it is this set?
So definitely a pilot dependent deck. As you guys know, like this deck I love a lot. I play a lot of it. Even before this video releases, I was playing some. And I think the deck is good. It has a really good matchup into green Saitama. It has a really good matchup into yellow as well. Being able to keep that 5-2 rested down. I think it still struggles to certain decks like Kurapika, and certain decks like Renji Rush and stuff like that. So it has a really good matchup into some of the top end decks, but it has a horrible matchup into others. So I can see why it's put in pilot dependent, just because you have to know your matchups. You have to know when to go into that Toshiro, or when to turn into a more aggressive strategy when you're going up against the 15-2 Saitama build.
Yep.
But I still think it's pretty well situated in the middle of the pack. Honestly, I
Yeah,
would say this is the deck that kind of defines what it means to be like a pilot dependent deck versus a rogue deck.
100% agree. I think Toshiro's in a spot where if you can see your Unohanas, if you're playing that build, which I think you should be, and get to 6 energy and having the pressure you can to lock down your opponent's board, it still makes those openings for you, especially in the green matchup, like you said. Them have, if they push up their kings, that's obviously not a blocker. So you get to tap down another thing, push in early damage. And when we get to the set 2, that's going to come out soon for Bleach, you get that Toshiro that grabs the raid back. So you get to just keep freezing your opponent's board, which is very good. Um, the other green deck is kind of Old Man Yama. I don't think any of us are really playing this deck. I think it doesn't really have a good finisher slash closer for the game right now. And based on the other decks we have, I'm just going to place it and go play another game because it's just not a deck that we should really be looking at right now. Now we move on to Hunter x Hunter, as those are Bleach decks. A first green deck is Gone and Friends. I think if you're going to play a rush deck, we have purple, we have yellow, we have red, we have other colors that do this better. Its big bodies are only temporary big bodies. It doesn't really keep posing a threat. Fishing Rod, like by itself, doesn't answer a 5k body. So I think there's just, you could play another game, or if it's your pet deck, keep playing it. This is a deck that I have already made a video on, and another fellow person here, Lullaby Anto, he's also been playing it, picking it back up. Green Kurapika. We still think this is the baseline for it. As somebody who's played it more recently, Anto, what are your opinions on where Kurapika stands with One Punch Man being released?
Honestly, picking this deck like back up after playing it when I first started the game, if you are a skillful pilot and a knowledgeable player, this deck feels so strong. It honestly is the baseline. It's the entry point. If you can't consistently beat this deck, like we all say, there's no point picking. There's no point placing any other deck in the top five. A 5K body that can snipe, remove something off the board is egregious. And now that we're at a point with some of these new deck lists, 5K starting to become like the new standard and like staple BP line that you want on board.
Yeah, totally agree. 5K is just the number to beat, and if your deck can't deal with 5Ks, then obviously you have to edit your deck to answer those bodies, because rush decks just losing a swing every turn, that's numbers you need. And as you said, having that snipe and also just having impact, just letting you take that body off and impress their life, so it's just so strong, so demanding, and such a good deck, and still very well positioned as being like a toolboxy deck that can answer things. Now, the other colors of Hunter x Hunter, we have blue specified slot. I'm putting this immediately in Go Play Another Game. It is a deck that doesn't have enough support. If we would have got Blue Planet off the rip with like our promo cards, I think the deck would have been a little more consistent, would have been good. Sure, there's some good players that can play this deck, but overall, the amount of card draw and the things you're doing with this deck, you could just do with other decks, as we'll get to, like one of the newer decks from One Punch Man can do kind of the same things this deck is doing. So overall, I don't think it's really in the meta, especially as we're moving closer to regionals and big events. I don't think it's a deck we'll really see. Along with the other counterpart of it, Blue Bomber. I think this deck already had a problem dealing with 4Ks because you needed a reducer, and now we're moving into a 5K kind of format or bigger body format, as Anto has suggested. So if you're already struggling to deal with multiple 4Ks, how are you going to deal with multiple 5Ks? We move on to the final color of Hunter x Hunter, which is purple. And I think I'm going to put the Phantom Troop up here in Rogue, but I'm really looking at this as a hybrid. We have fellows in our playtests like Greg and others from Twisted and Cosmic that have played purple, and they've shown that hybrids of this deck do very well. But as a just core Phantom Troops, I feel it's still lacking stuff to do it. And then same with the Zoldyck family. Zoldyck family, if you're playing the pure, it's in Go Play Another Deck. Silva having to discard 2 cards to get snipe may be strong. You have a recurable snipe, but you're still a 4K body. Getting removed off the board is just not very good for you. Now we move on to JJK, which arguably there's going to be a lot of controversy on these, and people are still arguing about this deck to this day. I still think the best deck in the format is arguably Nanami Sukuna, preferably the Nanami build over the pure build, only because in the format we are now in with One Punch, being threatened with 7 damage and a body that can just kill our stuff on swing, having Nanami be like, oh, if you killed me with your effect, I can rest another body. So that way I can stem the bleeding, also mill and get to my closers. Or you can block another swing, rest. It's just Nanami being a closer and also a defensive option is very good, especially Nanami special in my opinion. Nanami special being able to bot deck or top deck a card, it's giving you that control to force your opponent into drawing something again, so they don't get to advance their board state or advance their game plan for what their deck is going to do if they have to dead draw again. And then if they take an AP draw to draw a different card, that cuts them off of one extra AP to extend those turns out, and can be the make or break for some matchups for you. So I still think this is a very strong deck for our matchup here. Moving forward, I think it's going to take a lot to beat something as this deck that can draw 3, it can remove bodies, it can show you impact 1, it can show you damage 2, it can show you draws that untap its AP. It just does everything that everybody wants in a deck. And then we have the other blue deck, which is just pure Sukuna Yuji. This is a contender. I'm not putting it in top 5 because I think the Nanami deck is better, but it's still a very good deck, just pure Sukuna, pure draw power, pure board control, running it down, doing what it does best. We go over to the other colors. We will go to yellow. This is a deck that I think has some room in this meta right now, but nobody's really figured it out. This deck and one other deck we'll get to next. I think yellow Gojo here. I think with how Saitama works in yellow OPM and with green OPM, being able to tap things down, especially you could tap down a king that's pushed up early, you could tap down a silver fang that they put up that's a 45. Being able to lock something down and also have that protection where, like, hey, if you want to remove my body, you need to pay that extra. I think right now, if somebody can find a list for this, it will be very well suited. You have red special to push things back so you can mess people's energies lined up. You have the purple special to put things into a removal area so they don't get to the trash. I think this is a deck in Rogue that if you have the right list, you can attack the meta very well. Another yellow deck that is in Rogue is kind of an aggro deck, being in Megami. I think if you see the right cards with the damage 2 early and the Megami, you can put that pressure on and threaten some of these slower decks, but I don't think it's really up there in our contenders in top 5. Now, a deck that one of us used to be known for, but doesn't want to show her the light of day anymore. And so I'm putting her down and go play another game because I think you'd rather play Megami or Gojo. But what are your opinions on where Nobara is right now?
Hey, look, I love Nobara, but I think that the fact that she lacks draw really hurts the deck. Even in a situation now where we have these 10k bodies dropping where we could stun them and then just respond with double damage, you would think that she would thrive in this meta, but again, just the lack of draw keeps her shackled, honestly, is what I want to say. I don't know. I don't think we're getting. I think we do get a draw one, trash one in the set 2, and then there's also the new Gojo yellow package that we get. So who knows? Maybe our region will find something new and unique, and reinvent the deck. But as of right now, I want to say it's skill dependent, and even then, if you're a skillful pilot, it barely cracks the surface. You know what I'm saying? It barely cracks the surface.
Yeah,
It's one of
it's
those
a
things
deck
where it's the
that
matchup.
if your opponent sees the answers to respond to your board, you just run out of gas. And when you run out
Yeah,
of gas, then you have no way to get tempo back. And I can totally see that. And that's why I kind of put it down here because I think at least Megami has draws. It can cycle through. Gojo has draws because blame the Gojos. And it has those. The other 2 yellow decks have tools that can make it kind of compete with what's happening. Where Nabara, yes, by herself she is strong, but the rest of her deck, she needs work. The next one, this is Purple Toto. I don't want to look at this as Kyoto Academy. I want to look at this as Mahito Toto. I think the removal and the swapping power of Toto is very strong, especially into like green OPM, yellow sisters, Sonic. Being able to force them to bring up something and you remove one of their bodies with the Mahito half is just very strong. Then you also get to pressure remove damage too, and you're a 6K body, so it's not like they can block for free. I think it is very well suited. Now, for the other purple deck, I have no experience playing this deck, but someone here does. T-Mac, I put Ghetto in Rogue. How do you feel purple JJK is suited into this coming up meta?
I think because of Saitama, this deck is exactly where it needs to be in that rogue category. With the release of Saitama, unfortunately, our overall strategy, being able to force our opponents to be able to sack something on their board, because of Saitama and how Saitama works, they could just always choose the Saitama as the thing they want to remove, and then because of its first clause being not able to be removed by effects, it just makes the effect useless. Uh, so because of that, and just because of how many people are in OPM right now, I feel like this is not going to be as good of a deck. But you can still get people, especially if you go into a meta where, like, let's say for your example, let's say for an example, your local store doesn't have a lot of OPM players. I think still think Ghetto can do some work, but unfortunately, Saitama is just a hard counter to the overall strategy. So I definitely think it's better than a lot of the decks, actually all the decks in Go Play Another Game. But I don't think it can overcome that level of Saitama-ness that's in the meta right now.
100% agree. Yes, the Saitama just saying, hey, I'm unaffected is just crutches to Ghetto because you go, cool, Ghetto effect, they go, cool, I choose Saitama, nothing happens. And that hurts so bad. And that will wrap up for JJK for us. Now we're going to move on to Code Geass. And surprise, surprise, another purple deck going straight to the top 5. I think Purple Code Geass is still a very solid deck. It is a deck that has answers, has draw power, has force blocks, has board control. It's everything you want in a deck, and it keeps going. Even when you think they're out of gas and on 2 cards, they will draw for turn and show you clearing your board again and again. And having Gawain being like, you can't chump block, so if you're trying to just put guys up to try and do something, they just still get to put that pressure on. I know a person in our community that plays it still, Twisted. Twisted does very well with this deck. This is like his main deck. And we lab games against him to get the matchup experience because arguably, hands down, I think he's the best purple CG player we know. And he, time and time again, will show you that perp CG does not run out of gas and will keep the pressure coming and force you to learn how to handle it, or you will just become crippled from the pressure that perp CG is. The other purple deck would be Black Knights. I think this is just go play another game. Nobody plays this deck. Doesn't really have a good target to untap. If you want multiple swings, there's plenty of decks that we'll get to that do the same thing. This we're just going to move down here. Purple, which we don't need. Now we'll move to the red decks. Pizza. Sadly, I love this deck, but until we get the raid and other support, this is go play another game. Pizza just our finisher is a 5k damage 2, and since people already have regular cards that just have damage 2 that aren't finishers, really doesn't help. So I think it is just go play another game. And then in Rogue, this is always going to be kind of like the red rush deck. But there is another red rush. There's a couple red rush decks that come up that do this a little bit better than this one is. But for low to the ground rush decks, I think it is red Ashford. Being able to just play a body, untap it, keep the pressure going, swing 4K, untap a 3K. But the big problem is we did not get the Nunnally Japan had that said things couldn't be blocked by 4Ks or higher. And not having that Nunnally is what's holding this deck back. If we had that, then the 5k bodies and the bigger bodies that we're running into lately would not be a problem for this deck. And I think the deck would be up and pilot dependent or just not there yet. But for now, it is a rogue deck, and I think it will stay there for the time being unless we randomly get the Nunnally sometime in the future. Another top contender, which is a deck that another one of us plays very well. I tried it for a bit. It just was not my play style. But it is the tried and true Lancelot. T-Mac, how do you think Lancelot is into OPM now?
All right, so bias Lancelot best deck. Unbiased, I feel like it's just the tried and true green issue that it has, um, because OPM can get a body that can just sit on the board, especially yellow. It's very hard to deal with. Like that body will always stay on board. It is pressuring you. It is putting you on a clock. Usually, when you play Lancelot, that you're putting your opponents on a clock because as soon as that you see six energy, your opponent's like, okay, eight cost is coming down next turn. I'm losing a body, maybe two out of this. And if they have the Varus combo, you're losing three bodies. But with Saitama comes down on five energy, pressures you for two every turn, and if you even miss a beat, you're gonna get punished. So just for that, I think alone drops it down from where it was last metagame. But I think for this metagame, you still have to be worried about this deck. Like every other deck has to worry about that ACOS. ACOS is just so good at coming down, popping a body, getting the second one as well, and saying, "Hey, I'm a 5k damage to impact." That on its own is insane. So outside of Saitama decks, I think you still have to worry about this. Like you're definitely going to see this at like your high level tournaments, and once the regional setting comes around, people will still be playing this deck because it probably has arguably one of the best high rolls in the meta game right now. So I still think it's up there for sure. Um, but man, Saitama's like Saitama, just the card itself is just so hard on the deck. The damage too is just too much pressure.
100%. When you're trying to put a clock on your opponent and they answer back with a faster clock, you're like, okay, this is not what we want to see here. Um, then the other green is just like green Britannia. This is just go play another deck. Like there's like we said before, there's other aggro decks, other rush decks. There's besides the event buffing your board and giving one guy impact one doesn't offer anything that these other decks don't have. And with that, that's going to wrap up our code Geass. We're going to move on to Demon Slayer, which was the set before this one, which a lot of people thought was going to introduce a lot of decks to our meta, and it really ended up just being one, in my opinion. But we will first talk about red. Actually, we'll talk about purple. Purple is what I lined up. First deck, I put this in pilot dependent as Muzan is not a deck I have personally played, but in my experience playing against it, it is if someone focuses on the mill half too much, they don't get there. If somebody focuses on trying to board clear too much, they don't get to the Muzan. So I haven't really ran into a lot of personal problems with it. T Mac, I know you ended up playing this deck because you're kind of our jack of all trades. Do you think Muzan has a spot against OPM, or do you think it's just a slower green one punch?
I think Muzan still has very good strength against it because not only, especially in the green matchup, if you're playing against green as Muzan, you kind of have that time to build up because green OPM is looking to do pretty much the same thing that you're trying to do, like trying to get to that boss monster. They're trying to get to 15, you're trying to get to 20. So you get that time to build up and build up into your strategy and then come hitting hard and fast with your Muzans. Especially, you can also pivot as well, and this is why it's one of those pilot dependent decks because you have to know when to pivot into that aggressive strategy that the deck can play. A lot of people, I feel the reason why Muzan didn't do as good as it is in the West, not only because we don't have the set two stuff that makes the deck insane, is also because a lot of Muzan players tend to just hyper focus on that getting to 20 in trash so you can push up the Muzan. Sometimes you can't play that strategy and you have to fall back onto the good old tried and true purple strategy of going aggressive, going wide, dealing damage to your opponent, forcing their opponent's hand to remove your smaller body so you can gain advantage off those draw triggers. So because of that, um, I think people need to kind of pivot their strategy. And I feel like Muzan can still sneak a few like top eights here and there. And you definitely can see this deck on the top tables. I know one of our homies, Cowboy King, has been on this Muzan train just as well as myself. Um, throughout the whole format. But like I said, it is a very, very out of any of the decks I think on this list, outside of probably one deck that Tyler, I know you can't wait to talk about. I think Purple Muzan is one of the most technical decks because it has so many avenues, so many lines, so many things you can do, and so many ways to play the deck. I feel like the average pilot is going to take up the deck and just be like, this deck is trash. But if you get a really good Muzan pilot that knows how to pivot the deck well, and I believe it was Twisted who touched the deck a little bit as well. When he was playing the deck, he was fabulous on the deck. Like it was like he was seeing lines that I didn't even know existed. So it's a very skill intensive deck. You have to put the time in. You have to know the metagame, and I feel like for that reason alone, it can just sit comfy in the not there yet. But once set two comes out for Demon Slayer, it just goes from just pilot dependent to turn brain on autopilot mode. So um,
Yeah, 100%
if you
agree.
want, yeah, yeah, if you want lab out the deck, I think it will do well. It'll do fine for you, but you just have to put the time in.
I definitely agree with that. I think once set two comes out, I think this is literally shoots straight up to contenders and is a deck that everybody has to put on their radar because if you don't, it will run you down and you will not be ready for it. Now, next one is going to be the Daki Gitaro. I didn't have any experience playing against it. I never really saw any of it. I know Cosmic played some against Team Mac, and people play this deck, but I've mostly seen this engine in Muzan. I think there's other decks that do what this deck wanted to do, just better with more consistent tools. So I think it's in just play another game or wait for more support. Next, there's only two real red decks. I'm going to move this one down. We have Man Bear Pig, aka the Boys. It is a deck that, if you see all your pieces, it runs down your opponents very well. I know our friend Greg has been playtesting this deck again, and when he sees the lines and has the damage 2, has the impact 1, can restand, get some draws, the deck goes wide and the deck goes fast. And if you see those pieces, then it just keeps doing what it needs to do. And overall, I think it's just not there yet fully. Needs a couple more things, or you just need to be a really good pilot and you need to know the metagame and you can make the deck do what you want it to do. Followed up with Tengen and his wives. I'm probably just going to put this one down in Rogue, as in it does what the Man Bear Pig deck wants to do. It's just more focused on the wives and having Tengen swing multiple times and buffing your board. It's a little bit better than Ashford in my opinion, as in like you can buff the board since we don't have the Nunnally for Ashford. But overall, these are two very solid red decks that have draw power, have a way to deal with stuff, and can show you multiple swings a turn that keep on pushing. Now, here comes a very controversial deck that I know when I first saw it because of my JP experience, I said this deck was probably going to be the best deck coming out of Demon Slayer, and I was completely wrong. And I don't even think it deserves Rogue because it has shown us nothing, has done nothing, and proceeds to do nothing. And that is Hashira's. I don't know what I was thinking. Mostly, I was just thinking.
You about to get flamed in these comments right now. It's going to be
Yeah,
crazy.
You're Copio. I don't even know what
yeah.
you was on.
I was on a huge train saying this deck was going to be the new best deck, and when it came out, we saw nothing of it. We saw a lot from the next deck that we will talk about, and I have yet to fight or play against a good Hashira pilot that's made me retake my statement back. I don't think there's an argument for it higher right now. The highest I'd put is probably Rogue, but even then, I think the only good thing Hashira has right now is probably the GU, is because when you play against Saitama, you go, cool, you can't kill this, and it's an impact negate, so we can eat the Saitama swing. But if you're playing around just eating a Saitama swing, you're probably dying to a rush deck. So, in my opinion, this is where I place it. But now, the deck that ended up being the best deck from this and is a definite contender is going to be Yellow Siblings. As long as you see your Nezuko's and you can show your opponent multiple swings, games can end in a very, very few turns. Even if you don't see the Nezuko's, seeing the Tanjiro half is also very good. I know T Mac, we talked about this previously before this, where I said I think the deck literally just got destroyed without Nezuko, and you were able to open my eyes and be like, hey, Tanjiro still do things without the Nezuko's. You don't need the Nezuko's, but they just make the deck work like a better, well-oiled machine.
Yes, yes. Just being a 4500 or potentially a 4K with impact is just pretty solid. Like you're still getting your damage in, and once you have like a couple of them set up, especially the double energy one that gives a plus 1k buff when something moves, it's just really really strong. So you can't count it out just yet. You got to respect the deck, like, and it also has a really strong high roll as well. Like if you see the nuts, you just see the nuts, and there's no stopping you either.
100% agree. Now we move on to the one punch segment. Now, Anto, I know you've been holding back, but now it's time to give a little speech. I'm putting you straight in contenders. I don't think you're the best deck to come out of OPM, and I don't think it's good enough to breach that top five just yet. But go ahead and give us your spiel on this Saitama 15-1, 15-2, damage 7, one punch.
Look, all I have to say is this is the first. Well, let me put some respect on Hashira or whatever that green uh, bleach deck is. This is the first legit green control deck. Um, I think currently in the infancy, because the set is still pretty brand new, a lot of people are learning how to properly pilot the deck. What cards are meant to be in there. I'm starting to see a lot of people, and even in the tournament I took place today, realize that the raid Genos it's not good. It takes up too much space. This deck, if piloted right, has the potential to compete and even silence the top contenders. I mean, just today I made a Nanami and Renji player look like fools. I think that if you properly control the pace and tempo, um, you get your Saitama online. You should be around like 4 or 5 health by the time you get the Saitama online. Um, yeah, this deck is going to be here for a long time. It's very exciting to play, very fulfilling, and honestly, I'm very scared to see what they would add to this deck in Sec 2. Like how
Now the question people want to know, Anto, how many times have you one punched somebody so far?
too many to count, bro. Too many to count, bro.
You heard it here first.
Too many to count. And the series punch, bro. I could make a good argument for putting it in the deck because I have consistently used it. I play it as jokes, but like I'm at a point now with piloting this deck that a one of Series Punch might be very viable.
Yeah,
Might be
I
very
think
viable.
definitely killing a front line and killing an energy, mostly killing the energy. There's not a lot of cards that interact with the energy, so the fact that you get to kill something in the energy line is a very solid. Now, this one, not a lot of us played this version, but thankfully T Mac has this previous week. T Mac Green Heroes. I'm gonna put them in Rogue. I'll let you speak your piece on it after what I've seen from you, and then what I've seen when Anto
Seen
threw the
Steph.
metal bat in with the Saitama. I think it's okay to be in Rogue.
So how I built it obviously. I've seen Anto do the 15-2 Saitama way, so I kind of wanted to switch off of that and try to focus more on the heroes, kind of building like a Renjiro strategy. And while I do think it's very cute, I just feel like it lacks that oomph at the end, that aggression that you need to kind of be in this metagame right now. A lot of the top decks have some high quality finishers, and this deck, unfortunately, Metal Bat just being a conditional impact is not very good. Um, Again, if anytime if you could high roll and you see the nuts, I think it's very good. I've had a game where I was able to get a full board on turn 3, and just with the metal bat, and the metal bat can be very, very annoying, especially in tandem with probably Anto's favorite card out of this set, um, that new Silver Fang that your opponent has to discard a card if they want to target something on your front line. It's just very cool. It's a very kind of like stally deck, um, but I feel like not being able to get over a 5k, which is the threshold nowadays, is just really, really at honestly. So that's why Rogue is probably the best place to put it, probably the top end of Rogue, until we get more support.
Yeah, I could totally agree with that. Uh, is kind of like a green Renji Rush. You have recursion. You have a 4/1 that you can discard and untap it, apply pressure. It is definitely a good green rushdown deck. Um, now I know Team Mac hinted to this. This is the deck that I've been playing the most now, and this is the deck I'm immediately putting in pilot dependent. I wish I could place it. I really do. In my opinion, it definitely deserves to be up there. But this Esper Sisters is a huge pilot dependent deck. You can talk to Anto, you can talk to T Mac, you can ask anybody. This is a deck that has so many lines, has so much recursion. That the amount of things you can do in this deck is unbelievable. I know I make this joke with the guys a lot of the time where I'll look at my hand and I'm like, all right, guys, you got it. I'm losing this game. There's nothing I can do. And the deck will just show you one card that gets you to two, that gets you to four, that next thing you know it, you went from one body on the board to eight, looked at your opponent from seven life down to two, and you're threatening to kill them the following turn. And even if they answer your board, you draw a card and you're like, oh, you just killed four bodies. Here's four more. Please deal with it. And it is a deck I am very excited to see what it does in the North American metagame and where it goes regionals. And I am happy to place it in pilot dependent and see what comes out of it. It
If I may add as well, it matches the name. Like it just dawned on me that with what you're saying, right? It really encompasses the name of a tornado and blizzard. Like the ability to rebuild your deck so fast and wreak havoc on your opponent is very scary. And I, I think Bandai has done a great job with this recent set and really capturing the element of the IP that they're putting forward.
100% can agree. Yeah, and definitely Blizzard puts you in a spot where it goes, hey, I'm going to slow this game down or I'm going to pick the pace that we play at. And then Tornado just being able to come in, wreak that havoc, be like, hey, I get to play things for free. Hey, remove this. Our special can kill almost anything in the game. Literally, if we could kill Saitama, we could hit a 10K. I promise you, I could hit a 10K with this special. We'll get there. Uh, but now the deck that T Mac has been playing a lot of, and a deck that did break top five, and is the deck that now, if you don't know it, you need to know it. If you don't know the matchup, you better start playing it, and that is Yellow Saitama. It is mixed with the Genos here, that's why you don't see the Genos picture here, but this is Saitama Genos. It's a very solid deck. I'll let T Mac take it away.
All right, so probably easily the best deck out of OPM. You guys are free to debate me if you want. I think the deck is just insane. If you guys haven't seen my profile on it, it's on my channel. Go take a look at that.
Yep,
But
links will be in
man,
the description.
what a house of a card, bro. I could do a whole video about how busted this card is. It's a 5/2 card that says it cannot be removed off of the board by conventional means, so it is sticking on the board. It's swinging damage too. You can give it impact. It's a 10k body. Bro, what is there not to say about this card? And like the deck itself is so neat and compact and tight. Like it has tools for everything. It has the Genos package to be defensive when it needs to be. Encompassing that with the Genos color trigger, being able to nullify impact and restanding the Saitama. It has very good removal in the 4/2 Saitama, being able to play that and getting rid of a 4K body. You have the removal that can just get rid of 5Ks. You have the color trigger itself being able to stun your opponent's Saitamas. It has what else doesn't it have? It also has probably one of the best top four searches in the game in Saitama's apartment. If you're playing this deck, you can hear quote this, whatever, let it be known. If you are playing this deck and you are not running Saitama's apartment, I think you are throwing the game. I think that is easily the best searcher that we have in the game. Not only is it able to fix your energy, it is also able to search top four without any downside for your namesakes. So you can search your 5/2 Saitamas, you can search your 4/2 Saitamas, you can search your Genoses. It is the most situational searcher. It can dig you out of any any situation that you're at. If it could search the special, I think it would be ban worthy. honestly. But I think this Saitama deck is pretty much, you have to be aware of this. I think it is so warping to our format that any high level tournament that you are going to from now on, you will be seeing this deck. You will be playing against this deck, and have to know how your deck is going to deal with this. Uh, Anto can quote me, can follow up
Yeah.
with me on here. When we did our testing versus green versus yellow, I hate to say this, but I mopped the floor with Anto. Anto has the fear of God when it comes to this 5-2 Saitama. But after a while, Anto began realizing the lines and how the deck plays, and was able to counterplay the deck, also tweaking his deck in certain ways so he can deal with it. But um, I just think this is the best deck to come out of OPM. You guys are free to discuss. I know there's another deck here that people have been saying is probably the best deck in the format out of OPM, but once we get to that deck, we can talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, without me yapping anymore, I think this is the best deck. Honestly, out of OPM, you have to be aware of this deck.
But
I
let's not
agree,
forget,
bro.
they also gave you such a crazy card, T Mac. They gave you a 4 cost 1 AP deal of damage. So
Deal of damage.
if this deck did not have enough pressure, you get to keep pressing the gas pedal. And
You
but there's
you want to know
one
my
statement. I'll let you have the floor. But let me get you real quick. There's one statement. Saitama's apartment, great card. We'll always say T Mac is right. Arguably, if you were not playing it, you're probably wrong, and I trust T Mac on that. But best searcher, I'm gonna have to give that to Esper Sisters. 2 cost, top 7 for 2 cards. I can't name a better searcher
and
than that.
I'm not gonna
let me
lie.
count.
The
Let
one
me
drop
counter
king,
you.
the one drop
I'm gonna
king is a pretty
uh,
great
Uh,
searcher, bro.
I'm gonna counter you both on that right now. How many times you both play the deck? How many times have you both whiffed on Esper Sisters?
I
Let's
blame
be
that
the
on
count.
Anto. I never whiffed
I
until Anto cursed us.
since
I,
I've been playing that deck from before launch, I have only ever once whiffed on a Saitama's apartment.
I don't whiff
I've
on a one
always
drop king, and I get a
you have never
body.
Yeah, but you have to discard a card off that one drop king.
Yeah, but that
you
that serves the purpose of the deck,
We're
right?
talking about our searchers don't make us discard a card. His is an energy generation and a card to hand. Mine is 1 card turning into 2, sometimes only turning into 1 and just replace itself.
And mine's a body gives me a card and then discards a card. It adds to my purpose. Let's just all agree to disagree and say that this set has given us three of the best searchers out of
Everybody just
any of
wants
those
their
decks.
searcher to be better. 3 different decks, we just want the better. We'll agree to disagree. Now, the other yellow deck that's kind of niche that it completely is in go play another game. It's not even a rogue, not even not there yet. It would need like 2 waves of support, in my opinion. Is going to be the Bomb and Silverfang deck. Like, yes, it has stuff to do it. Is it good? No. Um, I don't think it's there. I think it's creative, but the tools you use in Bomb and Silverfang arguably better in some weird builds I've seen T Mac tested with Yellow One Punch. I promise you, I've seen Silverfang do some different things in this man's deck. Now we'll move on to the final color in the last couple of decks. This is a deck that T Mac was so happy for, and the JP players are also very happy for. This is a deck that I think is also going to end up in our Not There Yet says pilot dependent, mostly because of the namesake of the set, One Punch. He gets crippled. If you've seen the anime, you know why he gets crippled. T Mac, take it away if your boy Sonic.
okay. Okay, so I'll go out on a limb. You guys can quote me on here. I think Sonic is probably the best aggressive deck outside of one. Um, and we will talk about that one in a second. This deck can do some insane things. It is a better, more consistent
Yes.
siblings deck. You can
Yes.
fight. You can fight me on that. You can.
Yes.
I'm ready for it because not only can it do stuff without the everybody knows if you're playing siblings and they get rid of your Nezuko, it is a very tough time. With Speedo Sonic, you can if you're doing the hybrid build like I am doing, where you're mixing it with a Monsters Association, with the Doctor and doing shenanigans like that, or if you're mixing it with the Boros package,
Boros.
whatever you're doing, It is just super strong, super aggressive. It hits hard, it hits fast, and we got probably one of the best one cost cards of all time in Mosquito Girl. I think that card is just egregious. I think the 3/1 Boros is also egregious. Um, it can do some really insane turns. It can be hyper aggressive. It does really well into a lot of matchups. I think the only downside is like you mentioned, it hard. And I mean, when I say this is probably the hardest counter I've seen in the game so far, it hard loses to when your opponent plays a Saitama to the front line because you have no way to remove it. You have no way to deal with it. You literally have to look on that card and say, I cannot do anything to that except block it, which is very unfortunate. Yes, it is lore accurate. If you haven't watched it, so make sure you go and see why it's lore accurate. But I hate that fact, and that's why it will never be higher than any of our Saitama decks, just because of that clause and that clause alone.
Can I add some?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
The everything that Team X says, like I agree with that sentiment, regurgitated 10 times over. I just want to throw in the fact that we are. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first mechanic of taking life. I think we've seen it teased in Full Metal, which I'm super excited to get
In
that set.
America, yes. In JP,
Oh,
we've
so
had
there
yes,
is in JP.
yes.
Okay,
JP,
okay.
we've had multiple sets that have taken life.
Okay. Well, I just really like the way they incorporate taking your life here to go up both in like power and hand size. Like a Boros taking one life and then drawing two is disgusting. And being a double energy provider, like, is ridiculous. Now, much like Team X said, this deck can do some crazy plays. It has some high potential, but it also burns out really fast, bro. Much like the brothers sisters deck, and part of me not agreeing with you putting it in the not there under the Saitama the Tanjiro Nezuko is simply just because like both decks, if they get hit with a special trigger out of life or a removal or some type of, it feels bad. But at least with Speedo Sonic, I could just swap with myself, and you're running like 16 versions of yourself. If the Nezuko gets popped, bro, it's a really rough time. So, I implore you guys to come for this man in the comment sections.
Nah, my
And
rebuttal, my rebuttal is against One Punch
I am
Man.
ready for it because
Yeah,
I see the vision. That's the thing, right? You
yeah.
say it runs out of gas, but that's why you run the Boros package. That's why you run
mm-hmm,
Mosquito Girl.
mm-hmm.
You see these life taking cards. How I look at them is I look at it. I am playing essentially with a 13 card hand, right? Because I'm getting 6 extra cards plus anything else. So those cards, especially Mosquito Girl, bumping herself up to 4K and adding a card to your hand every turn, is I'm basically getting an extra draw every turn, bar none. It's like I'm playing One Piece, but in UA, where the cards are coming to my hand and not going to trash, which is so strong. Like while you are there struggling with your draw power, I'm playing with a 13 card hand.
100%. But my rebuttal for Anto and why it's not up there with siblings, Sonic, if he sees a Saitama, doesn't get to do his thing. Siblings, they see a Saitama, they don't care. They'll keep swapping. That is the difference. The siblings don't get to see just one card and be like, man, I don't get to swap. Sonic literally seeing a Saitama and his whole paragraph gets taken off of him kind of sucks. That's why he's
Yeah,
not there yet.
I will add though, if you are playing into green Saitama, I think Speedo Sonic is the better into that. If you're playing against yellow Saitama, you might as well just shake your opponent's hand and say GG.
And now the
I
other
will 100%.
100% agree. The other red deck that we think is probably, if not arguably, the better deck. This card is kind of crazy. It's going to be Red Garo. I think this deck is outrageous in what it can do. I've played it myself a bit. I played it with 8 zeros, and the deck was still going crazy. I've seen Cowboy play it. I've seen T-Mac play it. I've seen people in our local Discord play it. This is a deck that just wants to get to 15 cards in trash, which is 5 less than Muzan, but they have a 2-drop Mildew. They have a whole bunch of draw trash. They have search trash. They have a stage that's a 2 energy provider that mills a card. The trash is irrelevant, but this raid is a 6 cost raid that is a 4K base. At 5 or more cards in trash, it is now a 4K that draws you a card. At 10 cards in trash, it is a Impact 1 45 that draws you a card. And at 15 in trash, it is a 5K Impact 1 draw a card when attacking. And if your opponent didn't block it, it untaps itself. So you get to draw again. I think this card, hands down, is one of the best finishers we have in the game right now, and such a oppressive card, being a passive 45 5K body that if your opponent can't answer it, you're in trouble. And they have multiple ways of recurring this Garo.
Bro, let me tell you why. Bro, why did they give Red a blind mill too while Purple Bleach is out here suffering, not getting their Orihime
Odahime
their
was too
reappear?
strong. Blind Mill 2 is too strong for Purple Bleach, bro.
Yeah, tell me why they're giving Red a let me just drop and pay an action point to pop a 4K.
Yes,
Let,
that
let me
Garo is also egregious. A 3-drop double energy, 1-drop 25 that goes to a 4K. That also just says, oh, you can also just pay an extra AP and kill somebody who has equal BP or less than me. And you're like, okay, you just have removal that you don't need to use, but you could.
And then the best part is I don't know about most builds. For my own build, I'm also running the Boros package as well. So you can also, oh, I'm running out of gas. I need more cards in hand. Let me just play this 3-drop real quick, take my own life, and say, hey, draw 2 trash 1. Oh, I was only on 14. Oh, now I'm on 15. Here we go.
100%. And then they also have the 4-drop Garo. That is a scry. Look at the top. Oh, do I want to leave it on top or do I want to trash it? Oh, I have 10 or more. I have impact negate. Oh, I have 15 or more. I'm damaged too. Such a crazy deck, and the amount of tools they have is outrageous. Next,
And
yeah, go
actually,
ahead. Go ahead.
just
No, go
before
ahead.
you
You're
we
fine.
have we haven't talked about probably the best thing in the deck, and the ruling nightmare. Tyler, you can confirm here as well. In the special, it's probably bar none one of the best protection specials that we have for any deck, and it being able to say, all right, my damage to Garo or my impact double swinger Garo is now protected for the turn. Bro, insane card, insane.
100%. So if you guys don't know what it does, it is a 5 cost, 2 action point card. But if you have Garo, it's 1 action point. Kill a 5K or less on your opponent's board, and then if you have Garo, so baseline, even if you don't have the Garo, this is a 5-drop, 2 action points. Kill a guy. That's good. Because if your deck can't deal with 5Ks, just that alone. It's good. It can deal with a 5K without needing the Garo. But if you have Garo, it costs 1 less AP, and then you get to target a Garo on your board. And for the rest of the turn, if your opponent would activate a special trigger targeting the Garo you targeted, the special now goes to their hand instead of killing the Garo. So you can swing, hit a special, they go kill your Garo. You're like, nope, put it back in your hand. And you swing, you could hit another special. They'd be like, target the guard. Nope, it's for the whole turn. Put it back in your hand. And now you're just like, look, you didn't get to kill my guy, and I get to keep putting the pressure up. And it is a really nightmare because people just read it and go, how does this work? How does this happen? Is it protected once? Is it protected twice? Wait, does this go back to my hand, or does the Garo special? It's a whole fiasco. But yes, it is probably one of the best protection specials we have seen in Union Arena. The last 2 decks I don't think really have legs. I'm putting both of them down here and go play another game because literally we just talked about 2 decks that do what they want to do. Boros, he's just a really good package in both these decks. By himself, I don't think he's really good. Monster Association, there's cards that are good in both these decks. I don't think
That
they're good
4-2's
enough
a
to
trap.
be. Which one?
It's a trap. That 4-2's a trap.
Oh, yeah, this? Yeah, limiting your board space down to 3 is a trap. 100% is
There's
a
a
trap.
there's a deck for that we get later this year. I can't wait for that
Oh,
deck.
yeah.
Everybody who knows that I've played this deck before, and I can't wait for it to come out later this year. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
forced
seen
with that.
T-Mac limit his board to 2 spaces before and almost kill me. T-Mac got some spice cooking up, and he's ready to show you guys later this year.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
But all right, these last 3 decks, like I said before, this yellow Genos is really just in this yellow Saitama. If you're not playing Genos in the Saitama, I don't know what you're doing. You're probably playing the deck wrong. Go look at T-Mac's video. Like I said, Anto's video for his deck list is going to be in the description. T-Mac's video for his deck list is going to be in the description. And my deck list for Esper Sister will also be in the description. So if you guys want to see the builds we took and put together and made for these lists and why we're so happy and confident in our list, you'll be able to see and then try it out for yourself. Give us your feedback. This Purple Lelouch is not really a deck that's just this yet. Set 2, when we get the Purple Lelouch, then it's real crazy. And then Zenitsu, really Zenitsu's just played with the boys, and then he's like splashed in Tengen every now and then. Standalone, I really don't see him being as a standalone right now in our meta. But overall, in top 5, I think all of these decks we can see easily winning 1, maybe 2 regionals out the gate before the next set comes out. Next set being Black Clover, and set 2 Bleach. Some things will change it out. We'll have to give you our update when we get the new cards out. Contenders,
Wow, the disrespect for Sword Art Online. Damn, not even a real deck. Crazy.
I think Sword Art we will be cooking some stuff. I think Wave 1, there's a deck that is going to be very good out the gate here in America, I believe, but a deck that did really well and JP I don't think is going to do as well over here because it doesn't have the tools that we think it needs yet. But overall, I think this year, this summer, and when we do the next one of these, when we have the next set to add on to this, it's going to be pretty great to see where we go from there. Our contenders, I don't see these decks falling down. I think then they're just going to get better as more stuff comes out. Are not there and pilot dependent like this Bleach. Once we get the new stuff from set 2, I can obviously see it going up contenders. These red decks, if we see more decks that aren't named Saitama doing well, guess what? Both these decks, especially Sonic, is going to just skyrocket in playability because you're like, oh, more people not playing Saitama? It's my time to shine. Let me show you how fast you can die. Toshi, once we get that wave 2, and this is a recurable card, you can quote me now. Toshiro will be a menace when Bleach Wave 2 comes out. And if it is not, you can come hound me down, and I'll just send T-Mac after you. If you can beat T-Mac in a best of 5 on Toshi with Wave 2 support, then you can prove me wrong. But I don't think you guys will. I think this deck is very strong. Red boys, I think they're Man Bear Pig. It's going to be a good deck. It's going to be a good aggro deck. If you guys have your Demon Slayer events coming up this month, give it a try. It's a very good aggro deck. Muzan, once we get that wave 2, this deck is a deck that shoots straight into contenders, and you're going to have to watch and look out for it because it will get you early or it will get you late. Doesn't matter. As for Sisters, if you like a deck that has a lot of play lines and can really get you thinking, and you really want to show the skill diff between you and your opponents, and you want to show that you know your matchups, this is the deck for you to play. I have now, as of this week, logged over 200 games on this deck. I love this deck. It is a deck that you will see me play continuously from this point on. I can't wait. And I know T-Mac and Anto and them would hate. But if this deck gets good support in Wave 2, oh boy, they better not mess up. I will say it here, and I didn't say it earlier. My favorite thing about this deck is showing your opponent a final that they hit out of life, and you using that final 3 times in one turn, and looking at your opponent and go, I still have 5 cards in hand, and I just made a full board because of you. Thank you so much.
Egregious.
This is why I don't swing.
Hey, if you don't swing, there's nothing to get scared of. But this is our tier list. Stay tuned with us when the next set drops to get our input on where we think the metagame is and what may have shifted. Who knows? Maybe some of your decks here. You guys are good to go ahead and roast me if you're down here in the pet deck or go play another game. If you think you have a counter argument for how your deck can beat these decks up here, I'm all for it. I'm all open ears. If you want to run T-Mac against this Toshi deck, go for it. If you think you can take Anto off of his Green Saitama deck, please do. You can also call Nabarra trash in the comments. Make him go back to the deck.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to play it. But end of the day, I appreciate you guys. Myself, T-Mac, and Lullaby Anto, we're heading out for the night. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.